listening to Keon Sports, your top place for all professional wrestling coverage, past, present, and future. Stick with us at www.keonsports.com. Welcome in to the Player Spotlight Series. Tonight, we circle back to the vintage era of WWF with Tito Santana. Sit tight, put your feet up, and grab something cold to drink. Up next is Tito Santana, as we're going to go ahead and talk to him about his new book, Don't Call Me Chico. You can pick up that book at TitoSantana.com. And without any further ado, let's get him to the line now. On the hotline now, here with Keon Sports, Tito Santana, real name here, Merced Solis. Sir, it's an honor of mine as a current broadcaster and also someone who grew up watching the sport to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Vince. Thank you for being a fan, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to my wrestling fans.
Absolutely. The biggest reason we had you on today is to talk about your career. But before we do that, I want to give you the chance right away to plug your new book, Don't Call Me Chico. What can fans expect to learn in that book, and where can they pick it up?
Well, the book is almost 400 pages. I start with the beginning of my life. Started working as a migrant worker when I was 7 years old. I lived in South Texas when we used to come up north, Indiana, Iowa, Minnesota, and work in the fields, and how education became important to me, and how I got involved in sports, and then my football career, my wrestling career, and now my teaching, what I'm doing in teaching, and there's a bunch of good stories going on, and all they have to do is go to PayPal, TitoSantana.com, and order the book.
Excellent. Well, everybody, I would encourage you to go ahead and do that. So, I wanted to ask you here, I got a couple questions, and I'm very excited. I'm not going to lie. Grew up a hardcore fan. So, Vince McMahon chose you in the opening match of WrestleMania. It was his biggest gamble, with his company at the time. Obviously, changed the industry as we know it today. At the time, I know you were a little bit skeptical about having to go out first, but then he explained to you, right before you went through the curtain, what an honor that was. Looking back on that, how special was that he chose you first, you and, Playboy Buddy Rose, to set the tone?
Well, like you're right. At the time, I was pretty upset because me and Greg the Hammer Valentine, as far as I was concerned, we had the hottest feud going on in the WWF. We had been selling out all the big arenas throughout the country, and all of a sudden I'm opening a match, WrestleMania. I didn't look at how big the event was going to be. I saw the fact that I was opening the match. I was pretty disappointed. I thought my match against Greg the Hammer Valentine should have been, one of the main bouts for that WrestleMania show, and because it had such interest. But over the years, I've come to find out, what an important match that was for me and for the wrestling fans and for Vince McMahon, for him to choose me I'd be the one to set the tempo for the night, and I believe we went out and did it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we're going to get to that in a bit. You did it again. We'll talk here a little bit later on about WrestleMania 8 with Shawn Michaels, where you were given that role again, that responsibility, and you guys came out, in my opinion, at WrestleMania 8, you and Shawn Michaels, and tore down the house. So we'll talk about that in a bit. Now, shortly after WrestleMania, you won the Intercontinental title back from Greg Valentine, and then eventually you would drop it to Randy Macho Man Savage in February of 1986. Working with him that night and in that program with Savage, could you tell back then just how big of a star he was going to be? Was there something about him, working with him that you could just kind of tell?
Well, it really wasn't. Macho Man was a good interviewer, and to me, I thought that Elizabeth was the key to that team. Macho Man came to the WWF, and he was working, and I don't know if you remember before he had the managers, and all the managers started coming out and watching him wrestle.
Mm-hmm.
But when he would go out by himself, the crowd wasn't getting into him at all. It was like just an opener, a regular guy. And then the minute they worked out that angle where all the managers came out and they were all bidding for him, and Elizabeth comes out and she wins, and the combination of how he used to treat her and a beautiful girl that she was, and her part was fantastic, and she got as much sympathy as he got heat, and I did know that he had something special, and he was going to go on and be big, because I know that Vince liked him, and if Vince liked you, he was going to go with you.
What was it like for you to step out in front of 93,000 people at WrestleMania III? Could you just kind of talk a little bit about what was going through your veins?
Well, I was a rookie in the NFL playing for the Kansas City Chiefs in 1975, and I had played. They caught the ribbon, the Chiefs against the Detroit Lions. We wrestled, and it was raining, and the roof was leaking. So I had been in that stadium as a football player, and then for me to come out, before the matches, we kept hearing about what a big crowd we were going to have, and I went all the way to the top to see the ring look so small, and I just said, back then you didn't have the white boards all over the arena, so people could watch them, the matches close by. They could just see the ring, and it was that when I came out to actually wrestle and see the crowd, it was amazing. It was an unbelievable night.
After a very successful singles run, you got moved back into tag action. You had been there once before as a champion, and McMahon and the booking committee put you back there. This time, really exciting, actually. One of my favorite tag teams as a kid, with Strikeforce. You guys began in the August of 1987. You were quickly given a large push, given the tag team championship victory over the Hart Foundation, and the Hart Foundation was a really big deal. What was the transition like from you to go back, from singles to tag team, and what was it like to tag with Rick the Model Martel?
Well, Rick Martel and I had tagged in the AWA a couple of years earlier. We were both together in the AWA, and we really, really gelled in the AWA. But I was on my way out. I ended up going to WCW from there. That's when the old days when you used to travel quite a bit. I like, personally, I enjoyed wrestling singles, but they weren't doing anything with Tito Santana as a singles. So when the opportunity came for me to team up with Rick Martel, he had started out with Tom Zink, and I don't know what happened with that tag team, but overnight Tom Zink picked up his bags and flew home, and he didn't even give a notice. He just quit. So when Vince came and asked me, presented the opportunity, I know that he was going to be doing something, and it was for me, teaming up with Rick was a dream, and we did get over with the fans real big, but Vince pushed us. He sure knew how to get people over, and I enjoyed it for as long as it lasted. Things happened with Rick, and he had to go back to Quebec. I understand his wife was sick, and he wanted to be with his wife. That's what I was told. So we didn't last very long, but we did get over.
Yeah, you absolutely got over. And then they tried to bring it back at WrestleMania 5 against the Brainbusters. When did you find out that they were going to give it another run? Or did they just kind of tell you flat out, like, we're not going to give you guys another run. We just need to bring him back to split you guys up and start that feud. How did you find that out? And, what were your feelings towards it?
Well, I knew when they were going to split us up, it sounded like a good thing because I was going to go back to singles, and it was a ready-made feud. You know, I don't know if you remember how he left me in the ring.
Oh yeah,
there was a lot of heat. There was a lot of heat there, and we couldn't wrestle against each other. This is the way I wrestled against Greg the Hammer Valentine, because the people were really, you know, mad at Rick for doing what he did to me. But you know, I don't know why it didn't happen. You know, I think I went around with Rick maybe 1 or 2 times, and then they dropped it, and you know, never built it, never put any flames in the fire, and you know, it was over before you know it.
Yeah, I mean, that was the crazy thing about it. They, you know, they booked you to win the King of the Ring that year in '89, in which you did over Rick Martel, but they never let you guys have that, you know, that payoff or that pay-per-view blow-off match. At SummerSlam, you were part of a 6-man tag with the Rougeau brothers and the Rockers. Then in the Survivor Series, you guys were on opposite teams. But yeah, it is strange to me that you guys never had that one-on-one blow-off match. Another huge show was WrestleMania 6 in front of 67,000 people in Toronto. The hype was high that night because Hulk Hogan dropped the belt to the Ultimate Warrior. And a lot of people didn't see that coming. This was actually the first time since his AWA days that at least I know of in which Hulk Hogan, the performer, lost the match cleanly. What was the feeling amongst the boys in the back about taking the strap off of him and putting it on the Warrior? Because a lot of people have told me, and a lot of wrestlers have come out and said that they didn't think the Warrior was ready. How did you feel about it? I mean, you were a veteran at that time. People trusted you in your opinion. What did you think about that switch?
Well, the Warrior was never ready, but he was over like $1 million. He was out selling everybody in merchandise. You know, he got over big. When he was the Intercontinental Champion, the Intercontinental title belt was meant probably more than the world title when the Warrior was a IC champ. So, you know, even though he was not ready, you know, a lot of heels that he worked against had to carry him and suffered through working with him because he used the potato. I'm sure you know what the potato means.
Absolutely.
Didn't hold back, and you know, he hurt a lot of guys, and a lot of guys didn't like working with him, but he was drawing money. And for some reason, you know, Hulk was not happy. I don't know all the details, but you know, it was time. You know, it was time for Hulk to go. You know, how many guys could Hulk go up against? You know, they've seen it all.
You know, shortly after that, you were put in another pretty good program, one that I remember and enjoy very much. It was against Mr. Perfect, Curt Hennig. That summer, there was an Intercontinental title tournament. You made it to the finals. You lost to Curt, and then there was a rematch on Saturday Night Live or Saturday Night Main Event, in which you lost again. But it was a great little feud there while it lasted. What was it like working with Curt Hennig?
Curt was, to me, one of the best workers around. And when we had that tournament in Philadelphia, I from what I heard, I was supposed to get the IC title back, and then that's about the time that the Ultimate Warrior was coming in. No, not the Ultimate Warrior. Von Erich was coming in, and they decided to go ahead and Curt Hennig to get the title, and shortly after that, I think, if I remember correctly, he dropped it to
Texas. Yeah, Texas Tornado at SummerSlam '90, which was actually my next question. But I'll let you finish this one first if you want.
What was that? I didn't quite get that.
Oh no, it's okay. My next question was building off of that one. To be honest with you, Carrie Von Erich came in with a lot of hype for good reason. A wrestling family, you know, kind of a legend in the business at that point. Carrie Von Erich comes in, takes your spot against Mr. Perfect, Curt Hennig, wins the Intercontinental title at SummerSlam '90, but then never does anything again with the WWF. You know, dropped the belt back to Perfect shortly after. Why do you feel it just never worked out for Carrie Von Erich, who was given that push in the WWF, but didn't work out for him there?
Well, you know, he he had a lot of problems. He had a physical disability. I think he had a foot missing, from the ankle down, and he wore a prosthetic foot, and was, he was in a lot of pain, so he was taking a lot of, heavy duty medication that a lot of people did not know about. So a lot of times, he wasn't all there, and they couldn't count on him. He would disappear for days, and I don't know if I would have been able to wrestle with a missing foot. I don't really know all the details. I don't know what happened, but with all the hype that he had in Texas, you would have thought that he would have got over bigger and quicker than he did, but Vince just didn't push him. Vince decided who got over and who didn't get over. If you weren't doing what he expected, the push would stop.
In October of 1992, Vince went with Bret Hart as the face of the company in what was the end of the big man era, with Hulk Hogan taking a sabbatical. At that time, from what I've read, the research I've done, in October 92, it was either going to be you or Bret Hart as the new face of the company. Vince wanted to go with a technically sound veteran. How true is that? And do you feel at that point in your career that you would have been ready for the world title and to take on that, responsibility that Bret Hart took on?
Well, I was ready, and shortly before that, I don't know if you remember, they were building me to get the title. I beat The Undertaker in Barcelona, Spain in 91, towards the end of 91. They were planning on going into South America, Central America, Mexico, Spain, and they were going to put the belts on me. And I've heard it from, several people in the office, and I know that for a fact. And what they were, I had been in the territory longer than anybody else, so I knew how things were done. And, I was a good enough worker where they used me to get people over at times, and then they'd give me a big push, and then they'd bring me down again, and they put me to get over people again, and then they'd give me a push. And every time they'd give me a push, the people would get behind me. So I was over with the fans, but just didn't work out. I'm kind of glad, it happened the way it did. God bless Bret Hart. He came into a rough time. I don't know if you remember.
Sure.
He wasn't, because he was a middle guy. He wasn't a top guy, and all of a sudden they throw him into the top, and he wasn't drawing. He wasn't drawing it. He had to replace Hulk Hogan, or I don't know who he replaced, but it was very hard for him to draw. And then I don't know if you remember when I came back to do the commentating, and because I wasn't a fan, I wasn't watching what was going on in the WWF, but I saw that it was the Canadians against the Americans, and the fans were going crazy. And finally, Bret got over, and I as a commentator, I saw how much they finally got over, and they were drawing. The Canadians, him and Owen and Jim Neidhart, and all of a sudden I find out that they weren't happy with Bret anymore, and before you know it, he got beat in Montreal.
You were there, 10 feet away from that entire thing going down on Spanish commentary that night. What was going through your mind? Do you think they could have handled it differently, or were you just sitting there stunned like everybody else when Bret Hart got screwed?
Yeah, I didn't even realize, how he got screwed. I just know that, the bell rang, and they got a quick count. I didn't really know what would happen, and I saw Bret going crazy, and even when I saw him going crazy and spitting at Vince and throwing the stuff at the computers, and I realized, man, he really didn't know what was going on. nobody knew what was going on. The only one that knew what was going on was the office and the referee who got the go to give him the quick count.
What was it like backstage when you got backstage to the locker room to kind of grab your stuff and try to get out of there? Was it total chaos in the back?
No, it wasn't total chaos, but we did know that Bret went into the office into wherever Vince was and Shane were, and him and Davey Boy went into the locker room, and I guess Bret was really furious and he punched Vince and Vince used that to draw some money, and he came out with a black eye and explained it, and Vince was all about making money, and so he utilized something that happened and made some money with it.
The opponent that night for Bret Hart was Shawn Michaels. You and Shawn Michaels, as I said earlier in the night, or in the interview, at WrestleMania 8, in my opinion, you guys had one of the best matches on the card at the Hoosier Dome out there in Indianapolis at WrestleMania 8. There was a fan in the front row that was screaming for you the entire time. So obviously the fans were behind you. If people go back and listen to that tape, you could hear this young lady just screaming Tito over and over and over again. What was it like to work with Shawn Michaels that night? And he was so young, and here you are again, chosen to get a young talent over like that. Did you have the feeling that night that, hey, this kid, he has it, he might go far, or was it just another night at the office for you?
No, everybody knew that Shawn was the chosen one, and he was going to get pushed big time. And at that moment, if somebody beat me, it meant something. So they used me to catapult guys to the top, and knowing that I was going to, I just wish that I would have had a little bit more time, because he was such a pleasure to work with, and we still ended up having a great match. I think the match lasted like 7 or 8 minutes. I don't know if you saw when they brought us together at the beginning. The referee brings us together, and I'm looking at Shawn, and I tell Shawn, Shawn, you got a booger in your nose. And Shawn wipes his nose, and he walks away and turns around and comes back, and I said, yep, you got it. So if you want to go back and look at that, you can read my lips where I tell him he got a booger in his nose.
Oh, that's hilarious. I definitely will. Well, I thank you for joining us today. I have 3 questions left for you, and that we're gonna hit that 25-minute mark probably right on the button here. So I just wanted to go back one more time. Kind of an older question. I skipped over it because I wasn't sure if we were gonna have time, but I think we're gonna have some time here. So, right after that stuff happened in '90 in Toronto with Hogan and Warrior, you get to the Survivor Series later that year, about 6 months later. And here you are, Tito Santana chosen to team with these guys in the main event, the match of survival, Warrior and Hogan on the same team against, Ted DiBiase's evil team. And here you are, Tito Santana, chosen to be in that main event. How good of a feeling was that they put you up there with Hogan and Warrior? Because, they really didn't need to. They could have went with Slaughter's team. They could have went a lot of different ways.
Well, it was a great honor for me to be with those two guys. To me, they were the 2 hottest guys in the business at the time, and for me to be there, I look at the picture, and I was built pretty good, but they made me look small. They were big, and it was an honor. And when they did that, I was hoping that they were going to continue and do something more with me, but it was all downhill after that.
That was a magical night for sure. So 2 questions left, and one, because you're just, again, I look at you as someone who was a veteran leader, obviously, used against the biggest names when they were young, and so on down the list. If you were still with them in 1999, obviously we've talked a lot about Bret, but the tragic night, with Owen Hart, when Owen Hart passed away, if you're there with that group, what would you do? Would you urge someone to stop the show? Should the show must go on? Or as a veteran leader, do you just have to stick up for the company no matter what? It would have to be a tough position. How would you have handled it?
Well, the fans are the most important part, and the fans pay to watch a show. I don't know how they handled it. I was already in bed because, like I said, I wasn't a fan. Once I left, I didn't watch wrestling, and I still don't watch it. Not because I don't like it. It's just I don't really have the time, and I was never a wrestling fan. Even when I was wrestling, I grew up not being a wrestling fan in South Texas, and it was my kids that were watching it downstairs in the basement. And they came up and said, "Dad, Owen Hart just got killed in Kansas City." Oh, I forgot where they.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Camp Arena or something. I forgot where they were. The boys had no input. Everything that Vince said. That what was Vince going to do? Stop the show and give the people their money back, and all the pay-per-view that the people had spent. When you're in sports, it's hard, but, somebody in football gets hurt, he goes to the hospital, and the game continues, Having played football, I figured, it was the right thing to do, just continue to have the show.
Final question for you, and again, we want to urge everybody out there listening, head over to TitoSantana.com. The book is called Don't Call Me Chico. If you've enjoyed this 25-minute interview, just think about how much you're going to enjoy that 400-page book. Guys, it is excellent. Get your hands on it right away. Last question for you today. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for taking the time out. How special was it for you in 2004? The WWE had been doing Hall of Fame classes. They'd done a couple, but this is really the first time, they did it on mainstream TV. They had 10 inductees. It was really the first time as part of WrestleMania weekend. They made it a huge, huge deal in 2004 as part of WrestleMania 20. You got to be a part of that class. How great did that feel, and what was that night like?
Well, like I said, I left the WWE in '93 of August, and I wasn't a fan, so I hadn't been watching, so I hadn't even realized how big the WrestleManias had gotten. Because I wasn't going to autograph signings and at WrestleManias that they do now. When Howard Finkel, God bless his soul, called me, it was no big deal to me because they hadn't done a big Hall of Fame event. So the only thing that interested me was how much money was I going to get paid. And when he gave me the figure of what I was going to get paid, it sounded pretty good to me. And then they ended up flying my family from Texas, the WWE. They got two big limos for us to get picked up in my house. We arrived in New York. We get off in the hotel, and I saw fans from all over the world. I mean, just waiting for us. And that was the first time that I ever really felt. I mean, I was wearing a tuxedo. That I ever felt like a big star. I mean, it was like as big as they get in Hollywood, and the fans from all over the world make me feel really, really good. It ended up it ended up being a great night.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time today to appear here with Key on Sports. As part of the Key on Sports Network, we want to thank you one last time. And is there any last words you want to say to all the fans before we end today's interview?
Well, I just want to tell all the fans that are listening, and I want to give them my thanks because, the fans that I've had have stayed and continued to support me through either cameos. I mean, you can't believe how many cameos I get requested, and with the book, and whenever I go to appearances, they make me feel good, and, without the fans, none of us would be anybody, so... Tito Santana is Tito Santana because of the wrestling fans that always come behind me, and I'm forever grateful. Arriba!
Excellent. Thank you, sir, and I wish you nothing but the best of luck. All right, that was Tito Santana. You remember him, you know him, you love him. One of my favorites growing up. I am 38 years old, so I am right in that sweet spot, guys. In 85 for WrestleMania 1, I was going to be turning 4 years old shortly after that. And my memory is clear. I've seen every WrestleMania. I could tell you the winner of every match, SummerSlam, all of it. So, yeah, no doubt about it. Tito Santana, one of those guys. they could count on to put in there with the big names like Shawn Michaels, Macho Man Randy Savage, on and on down the list. Just loaded with talent. He had charisma. The fans were behind him. And truly an honor for us to be able to go ahead today and feature him on Key On Sports. Swing over to TitoSantana.com. Also, we will put a link for that book. You could order it here with this article as well. And thank you for clicking on it. KeyOnSports.com. I am Vince McKee. We'll talk to everybody soon.